16 times the British royals displayed a shocking lack of empathy. As one of the world's most iconic monarchies, the British royal family's been scrutinized and analyzed for centuries. Their status means they're always in the public eye, and their actions, words, and even emotions are constantly judged. This has caused much controversy over the years. There have been many instances where the royals have been criticized for appearing to lack empathy in their handling of situations. This could be due to protocol and expectations on them, differences between public perception and private realities, or simply missteps in human error. In today's video, we'll go over 16 times the British royals displayed shocking lack of empathy. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Number 1. The Aberfan Disaster Response, 1966. In October of 1966, a coal tip collapsed on Pancras Junior School in the Welsh village of Aberfan, killing 116 children and 28 adults. It remains one of the United Kingdom's worst disasters. As monarch, the late Queen Elizabeth's response was awaited. However, the late Queen did not visit Aberfan for 8 long days after the tragedy. The grieving villagers were shocked by her absence during this painful time. Many questioned why the late Queen was not there to provide comfort, support, and compassion when it was so desperately needed. The late Queen's delay in visiting Aberfan after the disaster was heavily criticized by the public as showing a severe lack of empathy. There was an expectation for the monarch to be present for her people following such an immense tragedy. Her absence in the critical early days signified a lack of care. While no official reason was given, some speculate the late Queen was initially advised by officials not to visit right away, which may have influenced her decision. Others suggest she felt uncertainty and discomfort over how to provide comfort and may have avoided the situation. Nevertheless, the perceptions of the late Queen's lack of a prompt response persisted. Queen Elizabeth would later express that she regretted and felt heartache over how she handled the Aberfan disaster. This hinted she may have felt more empathy privately than it appeared. However, the damage was done in the public memory. The late Queen's delay in visiting Aberfan has remained one of the most controversial examples of perceived unempathetic behavior within the royal family for decades. Number 2. Princess Margaret's relationship with Peter Townsend, 1950s. In the 1950s, Princess Margaret, the late Queen's younger sister, found herself in a difficult situation when she fell in love with Peter Townsend, a royal equerry who had been divorced. At the time, Elizabeth was the Queen, and Margaret required her permission to marry the divorced Townsend. However, the royal family opposed the marriage on religious grounds, as the monarch is head of the Church of England, which did not allow divorced persons to remarry. This conflict was seen by the public as prioritizing outdated duty and tradition over Margaret's personal happiness. The Crown's perceived inflexibility and interference in Margaret's romantic decisions was viewed as cold and lacking empathy. The sympathetic public saw Margaret forced to make an impossible choice between love and her royal status. As a sensitive and restrained woman, it seemed she was not afforded understanding or compassion from within the family. As monarch, the late Queen Elizabeth had to balance complex issues of religion, propriety, and succession. She may have faced private constraints as head of the church, yet the handling of Princess Margaret's relationship cemented public perceptions of an unempathetic royal family. Princess Margaret ultimately called off her engagement, stepping down as a working royal. The situation revealed what many considered unfeeling treatment by the institution towards Margaret and Peter Townsend's relationship. Number 3. Response to Princess Diana's death, 1997. In August 1997, Princess Diana was killed in a shocking car accident in Paris, sparking an unprecedented public outpouring of grief around the world. After her divorce from King Charles, Princess Diana remained an immensely popular public figure. However, the royal family's initial silence and lack of public mourning following her sudden death drew heavy criticism and backlash. The late Queen remained at her Balmoral estate in Scotland, making no formal address about the tragedy for days. The royal family appeared to be in no hurry to return to London to join the grieving public. Returning to London slowly from vacation and failing to fly flags at half-mast were seen as unemotional and unempathetic actions towards the millions mourning Princess Diana's death. The late Queen Elizabeth faced angry calls to break protocol and address the shocking loss of her former daughter-in-law. The perception was that clinging to tradition lacked compassion in a heartbreaking time. While trying to shield Princess Diana's sons, the royals' response revealed a deep divide between the monarchy and changing public expectations. It cemented impressions of an unfeeling institution lacking empathy. Number 4. Prince Philip's controversial remarks. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was known for being controversially outspoken throughout his tenure in the public eye, beside Britain's longest reigning monarch. He was notorious for making remarks widely perceived as racist, sexist, and culturally insensitive during his many decades of royal duties and engagements. His frequent gaffes and offensive comments reflected an apparent lack of awareness and empathy towards marginalized groups and people from various cultures. While some wrote this off as general ignorance, many felt a prominent public figure like Prince Philip should be more thoughtful and conscious of the power of words. An empathetic leader would take greater care to understand diverse perspectives and experiences. Yet Prince Philip often brushed off criticism, doubling down on controversial opinions. Towards the later years of his life, the Duke did seem to develop some more sensitivity around diversity and cultural issues. But Prince Philip's deep perceptions as an unempathetic royal persisted among the public. Number 5. Handling of King Charles and Princess Diana's marriage. The storybook public wedding of King Charles and Princess Diana Spencer in 1981 captured the world's imagination. However, behind closed doors, there were issues. As their marriage rapidly deteriorated, Princess Diana exposed her profound unhappiness within the rigid structure of royal life. She described feeling isolated and unsupported. From Princess Diana's telling, there was very little compassion or attempt at understanding from her struggles to fit into the stuffy traditions of the institution. This struck many as unempathetic. Furthermore, King Charles admitted to infidelity with Camilla Parker Bowles, which damaged his popularity. The crown seemed to lack consideration for Princess Diana's perspective. However, there were likely private marital troubles the public was unaware of at the time. Those within the inner circle saw more nuance and complexity. But to the public, the turmoil cemented growing perceptions of an unfeeling royal family, lacking empathy or compassion for Princess Diana's suffering. Number 6. Treatment of Sarah Ferguson post-divorce. In 1986, Prince Andrew, the third child of late Queen Elizabeth, married Sarah Fergie Ferguson in a lavish royal wedding. However, the marriage ended in a scandalous divorce in 1996. After the divorce, Sarah faced abandonment, harsh criticism, and financial hardship. Yet, she described little support or compassion from the royal family during this difficult transition. The Duchess of York gave various interviews complaining of cold, callous treatment by her former in-laws. This led to perceptions of an unfeeling family who lacked empathy for her struggles. Sarah described feeling cast out and silenced post-divorce. As a former member now struggling, many felt she should have been treated with more compassion and care by the monarch and royals. While Sarah made missteps herself, the perception grew that the rigid institution was unforgiving and lacking empathy or understanding for her mental health challenges and adjustment. For many, the family's response contradicted their refined public image. It cemented impressions of an elite family remarkably devoid of empathy behind the scenes. Number 7. Treatment of Meghan Markle. American actress Meghan Markle had a fairy tale wedding to Prince Harry, grandson of late Queen Elizabeth, in 2018. Initial public enthusiasm soon soured. A year later, the couple resigned as senior working royals. In a 2021 interview, Meghan described feeling mistreated, isolated, and unsupported behind the scenes. Meghan alleged no compassion from the royal family when she confessed mental health struggles. She said requests for help were ignored or criticized. This implied a callous lack of empathy. Meghan also faced ceaseless negative tabloid stories and little public support from the family. The perception was of unsupportive, uncaring treatment from an unfeeling institution. The royal family did not provide substantial counterarguments. To many observers, their silence suggested validation of Meghan's accusations of a culture lacking in empathy. For some, Meghan's revelations confirmed prior impressions of an archaic system unable to modernize traditions to support diverse new family members with compassion. Number 8. Prince Andrew and the Epstein scandal. Prince Andrew, the second son of late Queen Elizabeth, became engulfed in scandal regarding his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. After years of troubling allegations, Andrew gave a 2019 interview attempting to address the controversy, but instead came across as unsympathetic and unrepentant. When questioned, he expressed no real remorse or concern for the young woman victimized by Epstein. This apparent lack of empathy sparked outrage. While denying personal wrongdoing, Andrew failed to condemn Epstein's crimes with sincerity. His awkward demeanor lacked compassion for those who suffered. For many, it cemented an impression of an elite, privileged royal unable to empathize with trauma and exploitation. His choice to associate with Epstein at all indicated questionable judgment. Andrew's disastrous response highlighted a startling lack of empathy within the higher ranks of the monarchy. It raised concerns over the crown's moral compass and alignment with public values. Number 9. Handling of the Crown depictions. The acclaimed Netflix drama The Crown depicts the British royal family throughout late Queen Elizabeth's historic reign. It explores both public triumphs and private scandals. While envisioned as a fictionalized show, The Crown has been scrutinized for taking creative license at times. However, the royal family has not directly addressed most of their depictions. Their silence over unflattering portrayals has been interpreted by some as a lack of understanding or care towards public interest in the monarchy's transparency and reputation. An empathetic leader might recognize the value of acknowledging people's concerns, even regarding dramatized accounts. Yet the late Queen and royals left many questions unanswered. To critics, their disapproval and refusal to participate in the show demonstrates an archaic resistance to modern media norms. Their posture hints at possible lack of empathy. However, the royal family likely feels depicting the sovereign without consent is an inherent transgression. Their wariness reveals the complexity behind public perceptions. Number 10. The late Queen's Annus Horribilis speech, 1992. In 1992, the late Queen famously referred to the year as her Annus Horribilis during a speech. She was referencing various scandals and misfortunes for the royal family that year. These included the unraveling marriages of King Charles and Prince Andrew, Windsor Castle burning down, and more. The late Queen called 1992 an Annus Horribilis in a speech that year. Her choice of Latin phrase meaning horrible year sparked some criticism for being disconnected from the perspective of common people and broader societal issues. Using opaque language to reference her family's struggles came across as self-involved. Some felt empathy from the monarch over public concerns was lacking. The late Queen's speech echoed a perception that the royals were trapped in their own bubble of privilege, unable to relate to the realities of their subjects' lives. However, the phrase Annus Horribilis was likely meant to convey the late Queen's wariness in a difficult time, not disregard for others' troubles. Perceptions often differ from intent. Number 11. Historic reluctance to discuss mental health. Historically, the royal family maintained a strict sense of decorum regarding privacy and personal matters like mental health struggles. Until recent years, public perception of mental health issues from members of the royal family was extremely limited. They preferred to project an image of resolve and perfection. This restraint was interpreted by some as a concerning lack of empathy towards those wrestling with mental illness, trauma, or inner turmoil. An influential public institution that avoids such an important topic may be perceived as insensitive to society's changing need for empathy regarding mental health. Increased advocacy in recent decades has pressured the royals to open up. Younger royals like Prince Harry and Prince William have shared some of their mental health experiences. While traditions are hard to shake, the late Queen and royal family's former reluctance to show vulnerability revealed an outdated lack of public empathy on mental health. Number 12. Perceived poor treatment of Princess Diana. Princess Diana remains an icon even after her tragic 1997 death in a car accident. During her marriage to King Charles, she revealed profound unhappiness. Princess Diana spoke candidly about feeling unsupported, mistreated, and deeply unhappy within the rigid structure of royal life after her fairy tale wedding. She shared publicity about struggles with self-harm, bulimia, and poor mental health she felt were not properly addressed by the royal family. Princess Diana cited a lack of compassion or attempt at understanding from the royal family. This struck many as remarkably unempathetic. The princess exposed inner workings of an archaic institution she found toxic. Her revelations displayed little regard for her well-being. For many, Princess Diana's disclosures cemented an image of the British royal family as highly dysfunctional and deficient in empathy behind their refined image. Number 13. Handling of homosexuality. Historically, the royal family maintained a strict conservative outlook on social issues in keeping with British institutions. This included issues impacting the LGBTQ+ community. Same-sex relationships were only decriminalized in 1967 in England. For many subsequent decades, the royals largely avoided public support or acknowledgement of LGBTQ+ issues. Their silence was seen as a lack of empathy and advocacy for a marginalized group facing ongoing prejudice. Legal same-sex marriage was not allowed until 2013. While likely adhering to precedent, the royal family's reluctance to take a progressive stand on homosexuality demonstrated a perceived lack of compassion. An empathetic, moral leader would arguably be an ally against discrimination. So in a modern context, their past restraint appears unsympathetic. Today, prominent royal family members like Prince William voice more support for LGBTQ+ rights, but their past avoidance lingers as an example of institutional deficiency in social empathy. Number 14. Attending Margaret Thatcher's funeral. The late Queen Elizabeth made history by attending Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's funeral in 2013. It was the first funeral of a Prime Minister the late Queen attended since Winston Churchill in 1965. Thatcher was a divisive political figure whose policies negatively impacted certain communities. Attending her funeral was therefore seen as a political act by the late Queen. It signified a lack of empathy and disregard for those who suffered under Thatcher's leadership in industries like mining. Her premiership left lasting damage in their communities. By honoring such a controversial leader in death, Queen Elizabeth displayed a perceived deficient in compassion for these marginalized groups still feeling Thatcher's impacts. As a constitutional monarch, strict neutrality is key. Honoring Thatcher's polarizing legacy demonstrated partiality to some observers. The late Queen's attendance exemplified how even ceremonial acts by the monarch can be viewed as a signal of values. In this case, it communicated an apparent lack of empathy to many. Number 15. Lack of support for Princess Diana's charity work. During her time in the public eye, up until she died in 1997, Princess Diana was renowned for charity work, advocating for vulnerable groups. She brought awareness to marginalized groups like the homeless, sick children, and people living with HIV/AIDS, among other causes dear to her. However, Princess Diana revealed she often felt starved of support and recognition from the royal family for her humanitarian efforts during her lifetime. To critics, this demonstrated a lack of empathy from the institution for both Princess Diana's work and the vulnerable group she tried to support. Greater shows of encouragement may have validated Princess Diana's passions. Their absence suggested an unappreciative or unempathetic attitude towards her important work. For some, the royals' treatment of Princess Diana, both in marriage and charitable duties, revealed an emotional deficiency within the outdated institution. Number 16. Reactions to colonial history. The UK monarchy oversaw the growth of the British Empire, which had vast colonial reach, cultural impacts, and human costs. While largely in the past, the legacy of British imperialism and its consequences persist, including royal family wealth tied to the colonial era trade. However, the late Queen and royal family have been reluctant to offer apologies, make amends, or even acknowledge the damages of this colonial history. To critics, this demonstrates an unempathetic attitude failing to reckon with the suffering, exploitation, and intergenerational trauma caused under Crown oversight. An empathetic leader would address past wrongs through recognition and repair. The royals' posture seems defensive and avoidant of harsh truths to some observers. As public awareness grows surrounding colonial injustice, the royal family's inaction appears unsympathetic and reflective of an obsolete, unfeeling institution. And those are just some of the most hotly debated examples of times the British royal family was accused of lacking empathy. While they've taken missteps, today's royal family does seem to be making efforts to modernize and show greater compassion on issues like mental health. But they have a fine line to walk in upholding tradition while also evolving. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the royals receive unfair criticism about empathy, or have they demonstrated a problematic lack of it at times? How do you think they could be more empathetic leaders today? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you found this discussion interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to join the conversation. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.